Hi YouTube, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery, and visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Today we're going to talk about some pocket knife maintenance. I don't know if you guys have been following me anywhere else or not, but I've been making an awful lot of these little pocket knives lately, having a ton of fun now that they're finally starting to be what I wanted them to be. You know, you would think that something with two moving parts would be mighty simple to make, but boy, let me tell you, getting everything just the way I want on these things has been quite a challenge. Pretty much that's what I've devoted this whole year to doing. And boy, they're coming out really nice anymore. The tips are way more centered, if not dead on centered. The whole builds are coming along a whole lot smoother and faster. The fits and finishes are getting, you know, to a higher level. It's just a whole lot of fun watching these things get to be where I want them to be. I just finished out a batch of 4 of these little elk antler scaled pocket knives. A fellow wanted, I guess he'd found a elk shed from somewhere or other, sent me the elk shed and said, hey, I want 4 matching knives out of this same elk shed, one for me and one for each of 3 of my buddies. And so, you know, that was an awful lot of fun. I finished them up this morning, so I got to send him an email here as soon as I'm done with y'all. But one thing about these pocket knives that's a little bit different, you know, because you guys know I typically make kitchen knives, hunting knives, you know, big choppers. Well, I haven't made any of those in quite a while, but you know, knives that typically aren't carried on your person like in a pocket. You guys also know that I'm really into high carbon steel. I'd say probably 70% of the knives I make are out of 1095 high carbon steel. The rest of them would be out of 5160, 52100, and a smattering of 440C stainless. But 1095 steel, it's what I've been making most of these out of. It has no corrosion resistance whatsoever. And it, you know, for me here in Wyoming, where we're almost a semi-desert for, you know, most years. This year was pretty wet, but most years we don't really have humidity to speak of. I mean, I make the joke that if you spill a cup of water on the kitchen floor, by the time you go get a mop and come back to clean it up, it's already evaporated. So rust, you really kind of have to work hard to get anything to rust around here to an appreciable level. You'll get surface rust here and there, but I mean, as long as you use your knife, dry it off, and then store it, then typically I don't even use any kind of rust preventative or anything on any of them. I mean, this has been my everyday carry now for a year or so, and I don't oil it, I don't nothing. I mean, I wipe the thing on my jeans or maybe on my shirt, and I put it back in the Kydex sheath, and there it sits. And it sits in a very close to the body Kydex sheath that's right on my hip all the time. So, you know, it gets quite a bit of body heat there. Pocket knives are a little bit different. Pocket knives sit down inside the pocket, and they are typically, you know, one layer of fabric away from your flesh. Most people's flesh is fairly warm, you know, 96 degrees or so. A lot of times if you're working, or if you're working in a hot place, or just hanging out in a hot place, you know, right there next to your skin like that with no other you know, barrier, there's going to be moisture coming off your skin, and so you'll end up with a little bit more chance of rusting things. And so I've had several emails about, hey, you know, am I doing something wrong? You know, I'm getting some surface rust on my pocket knife. You know, what do I do? So I thought we'd shoot this video. Now, this one right here, this one's been in my pocket since I made it about 3 or 4 months ago or so. And it was doing really good until last week. I had a water line break. And so I ended up digging a couple of fairly large holes by hand, finding out where the water line was to be able to cut out that section of line and replace it and, you know, restore water back. And so that was, and it was 80, 90 degrees during the day, and so it's hot, I'm sweating, and boy, let me tell you, this knife got a pretty good beating off of it. And so there is a little bit of surface rust on the blade, and there's probably some down on the inside of the back spring. There's some on the back spring right here. Now, personally, that does not bother me in the slightest. During the summertime, you go outside, you get a tan, and during the wintertime, you stay inside, that tan kind of goes away. Same thing with pocket knives. If you'll get into a spot where, they'll patina, and that patina will build up over time, but it's not something to really worry about all that much. It's one of the things that if you're a lover of high carbon steel, you love it. If you're not, then you might not love it so much. So this video is mostly for the guys that might not love it so much. They like the advantages of the high carbon steel, the ease of sharpening, the edge retention, all that kind of stuff, but maybe not quite so much the maintenance on it. Okay, so to take this rust or patina or discoloration off, the best way, and the way that I do it, is so I've been finishing these things out with a 600 grit hand sanded finish. They're also all flat ground, okay, so they're ground on a flat platen and then sanded with a sanding stick. Now the way I sand these blades is before I put them into the handle, I mount them on my sanding stick here, and then I take a piece of steel, it's got 600 grit sandpaper wrapped around it, and then I sit there and I hand sand it back and forth. Okay. Now, if you're just wanting to clean it up, it does not take very much at all. You don't even need the stick. You can take, just some sandpaper, fold it in half, and set it on anything flat. The edge of your desk, the edge of your counter, anything that's got section of 2x4. Anything that's going to support that sandpaper. Then what you do is, now right up in here where my mark is and where my where the steel type is, that we'll have to get to in a second. But for the blade where the plunge line goes up, okay, you take your piece of sandpaper, we'll get a fresh spot here, you lay that plunge line on that sandpaper, keep the blade flat to the surface that's backing the sandpaper, and then draw it. Okay, one at a time, and that will leave you your nicest finish. Okay, if there's a lot of rust, now you can see how just that little bit really brightened that up. Now I'm probably not going to take all this down to bare metal because, well, I don't really see the need to. But you could if you wanted to. Same way on the other side. See how much corrosion is there? We'll do this a couple of times. Actually, that's kind of tough sitting it up there, and you can see here. You just set that on the edge of the bench. And just those couple of strokes really brighten that blade up. Now, to get to the mark and the steel type, typically you have to turn the blades to the half stop position. Okay, now when it's at the half stop position, you can see an awful lot more of the tang right up in here. Okay, so now there, that's an electro etch mark, and so it's not very deep at all. So on something like that, you'd want to grab like some 1000 or 2000 grit sandpaper, something along those lines, and then just very, very gently get up in there and make little bitty motions like that. And you can see that brightened up the 1095 considerably. And just a couple of strokes brightened up the mark part considerably. Now, to clean the inside, if you don't have an air compressor, the best way that I've found is the WD-40 in the spray can with the handy dandy. You can't lose little bitty straw on the end. Okay, and then you just shake that up, get it here where you, now when you do this, you're going to be spraying that into a tight little spot right there, right? So there is a pretty good chance that that WD-40 or if you use any kind of carbon choke cleaner or anything like brake cleaner, it can spray back up at you. So kind of do it away from you. Okay, that'll flush that out mostly, and then grab yourself a paper towel, fold it up, and then stick that corner up in there. And you can clean out the inside pretty well. There's nothing really in the inside that's, I mean, you're just getting the gunk out. I mean, you will get a patina in there. I don't really know of any way that you're going to be able to clean that patina out without really scuffing up the insides of the liners. Now the liners on this one are brass, so they really won't corrode all that much. I mean, if you were to you know, leave it in a tackle box or something like that that was like wet all the time, then that brass would start turning kind of like a greenish color after a while, kind of like copper will. But then you just pull it out and wash it off and wipe it off. The back spring right here, same thing. You could take that 600 grit paper and brighten that up real fast if you want to. Now, do all this before you sharpen the blade or before you tune up the edge, you know, before you put it back in your pocket. Now we got to talk about oils. So I use 3-in-1 oil. Just regular old 3-in-1 oil. You get it at Walmart or you know, any hardware store. And I typically put a drop right down in there. Okay, now once you get that drop in there, go ahead and open it, you know, back and forth quite a bit to let that oil get down into the joint pretty good. If you don't have oil in that joint, you know, it's got moving parts, so you got steel on steel moving. If there's no oil in that joint, then it's going to start wearing. And over time, that'll kind of loosen the action of the knife up. So keep oil in there if you can. Now that being said, the oil that gets trapped inside that pivot is going to stay there a whole lot longer than the oil that's on the blade, because when that oil comes on the blade, you know, every time you use it, it's going to wipe that oil off. Oil also has a tendency to evaporate with heat, and if that's stuck in your pocket all day long, you already got the source of heat there. So a lot of times, if you've ever carried like a handgun for a long amount of time, like on an inside the waistband type holster where it's tight up against your body and it's got all that heat, regular oil like 3-in-1 oil or Hoppies or something like that will evaporate an awful lot faster than what you might think. So typically when that happens, if you change to like a grease, that grease has got, it doesn't evaporate the same way as oil does. And so while it might not be as slippery as an oil is, it stays put. So in that same line, if you're really worried about, you know, wanting to keep that bright shiny finish, put oil on your pivot, but then on the blade, use something more like a grease. Like I said, I don't use this kind of stuff, but I would kind of tend to want to go towards something that was mostly food grade, just because I do use a pocket knife to open up packages of food. I use it to peel apples. I use it to cut tough steaks at the restaurant, you know. I mean, that pocket knife can get used for all kind of stuff, and some of the stuff I'm going to eat after I get done cutting it. So, Carmex, you know, chapstick, anything like that that's going to be, you know, a wax base that's meant to go on your lips, you know, well, that's going to be most likely more than, you know, mostly food grade. Coconut oil, I think, would be a really good one, because this is a solid at room temperature. So you've got to, I mean, if you've ever used this stuff, it actually doesn't taste too bad. But it comes out as, I mean, see, it's a solid. So you put that in the pan, and then it takes a while for it to melt down and become a liquid. And then this, pretty much the second you remove the heat, sometimes it kind of seems like it goes back to a solid really fast, like in the refrigerator, you know, for leftovers. Crisco would be another one that I would think of. Hell, even maybe some margarine, you know, something like that. Anything that's a solid at room temperature and is kind of sticky and kind of oily like that, that is food grade. You can go ahead and take that and then, you know, wipe it on your blade and get it down inside the nail nick and everything, and then see how that works for rust preventative. I'm sure somebody somewhere has basically taken Crisco and put it into a, you know, a fancy little jar and put a cool name on the side of it saying, you know, knife rust preventative, and instead of spending, you know, $4 for a whole tube of this, they charge $20 for a little bitty jar like that. But I would just look for stuff that you've got around the house to start with. That being said, you know, I've used an awful lot of 3-in-1 oil on pocket knives over the years, and cut up plenty of apples, and I mean, it doesn't really taste all that good, but I'm still alive, so maybe it's probably not food grade. Anyway, so yeah, sand it down if you need to. Also, these little green scratchy pads that you find, these are final stripping pads, but they're the same thing as far as I can tell as the green scratchy pads that are in the dishwashing section at Walmart. These will work really good for removing, you know, light surface rust also and corrosion off of your blade. But anyway, clean the blade up, oil the joint, or clean it up, blow it out, oil the joint, and then, you know, sharpen it, touch up the edge, do whatever, put it whatever kind of rust preventative that you're going to on there if you so desire, and then put the thing back in your pocket and get back to work. So again, now I'm going to ask you guys if you do use anything like this as a rust preventative on your high carbon steel pocket knives, put it down in the comments below. Let me know if maybe somebody has used Crisco and they found out that it really doesn't work all that well at all, but you know, lip balm does. But just let us know. So again, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can visit me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we will see you next time.